Welcome to the final episode of the Psychological Safety Series podcast, where we explore how psychological safety extends beyond individuals and teams to transform entire workplaces, professional organizations, and industries. This episode is hosted by James Carter, BSN, RN, an ICU nurse with frontline experience in high-pressure environments. Emily Ramirez, MSN, RN, a nurse manager passionate about fostering open communication and leadership development. Psychological safety does not stop with one leader, one team, or one initiative. It has a ripple effect. A single nurse fostering open communication can inspire an entire unit. A professional association that values diverse voices can set a new standard for networking and collaboration. A hospital that embraces psychological safety can improve retention, reduce medical errors, and enhance patient outcomes. In today's discussion, we will explore how psychological safety spreads and why it sometimes fades without reinforcement. We will uncover strategies for expanding and sustaining psychological safety at scale, whether in a hospital unit, a professional network, or an online community. Join James and Emily as they dive into the lasting impact of psychological safety and share practical ways to create a culture of trust, inclusion, and collaboration. This is the Ripple Effect, expanding psychological safety beyond your team, based on the article by Dr. Nicolas Abella. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Healthcare Nurses Network podcast. We're all about giving you the tools and knowledge you need to really thrive out there on the floor and beyond. Today, we're tackling a topic that can transform not just your team, but your entire hospital, expanding psychological safety. We talk about creating it within teams,
Right.
but what happens when we want to spread that feeling of safety even further? That's what we are diving into today.
What's so fascinating is that psychological safety, it doesn't just stay confined to a single team. Think of it like a ripple effect. You know, when individuals feel safe to speak up, share ideas, and learn from mistakes,
Yeah.
it inspires others to do the same.
But we're not just talking about making one team feel safe,
Yeah,
but creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up.
exactly. It's about that culture shift.
Yeah.
And there's research showing that departments with high psychological safety can actually influence other teams to adopt similar practices. They see those positive outcomes, better collaboration, less burnout, stronger leadership, and they naturally want to replicate that success.
That's incredible. It sounds like a snowball effect of positive change.
Yeah.
But you know, our source material also mentioned that psychological safety can fade if we're not careful.
Right.
Why is that? Shouldn't the benefits be enough to keep it going?
Well, you'd think so, right? But workplaces are constantly evolving, new staff join, priorities shift, and sometimes those old habits of holding back or fearing judgment can creep back in. It's like a garden. You need to constantly tend to it, nurture it, and make sure those weeds of negativity don't take root.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we prevent this fading effect? How do we make sure psychological safety isn't just a temporary initiative,
Yeah.
but becomes deeply ingrained in the culture?
That's where the ECHO framework comes in. It's a strategic approach with 4 key pillars designed to expand and sustain psychological safety in any setting.
ECHO. I'm intrigued. Can you break down those pillars for us? What does ECHO stand for?
It stands for Establish Daily Reinforcement, Cultivate Mentorship and Role Modeling, Harness the Power of Networks and Digital Communities, and Organize System-Wide Support and Policies.
Okay, let's unpack these one by one. Starting with E, establish daily reinforcement. What does that look like in practice?
It's all about integrating psychological safety into daily routines and practices. Instead of it being a one-time training session,
Right.
it needs to be woven into the fabric of how we work. Think about simple things like starting meetings with a question that encourages open communication.
Like, what challenges are we facing? Is there anything we need to be aware of?
Exactly. Or imagine incorporating psychological safety into orientation programs for new nurses. It sets the tone right from the start that this is a place where it's okay to ask questions, admit mistakes, and learn from each other.
That makes so much sense. You're establishing those expectations from day one.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got E covered. What about C? Cultivate mentorship and role modeling.
This pillar is all about leading by example. You know, we learn best by observing others, especially those we admire or trust. When senior nurses or leaders demonstrate psychological safety in their interactions, it gives others the confidence to do the same.
So it's not enough to just talk about psychological safety. We need to see it in action.
Absolutely. And it's not just about leadership. Peer-to-peer coaching can be incredibly powerful too. Imagine experienced nurses guiding newer nurses on how to communicate effectively, give constructive feedback, and navigate challenging conversations.
Our source mentioned a hospital unit that implemented a mentorship program specifically focused on psychological safety, pairing new nurses with experienced mentors. That's brilliant. It creates such a supportive environment for learning and growth.
It does. Now let's move on to harness the power of networks and digital communities. This pillar really excites me because it shows how psychological safety can extend beyond the walls of our workplace.
I'm curious about this one. How can we leverage networks and online platforms to foster psychological safety?
Think about online nursing communities or professional associations. These spaces have incredible potential to create safe spaces for discussion, debate, and sharing knowledge.
The source specifically mentioned establishing clear engagement guidelines. Can you give me an example of what that would look like?
Absolutely. Imagine a LinkedIn group for nurses where the community guidelines emphasize respectful dialogue, constructive feedback, and solution-focused discussions. It sets the tone for a more positive and supportive online interaction.
So we're creating these virtual pockets of psychological safety that can then influence the way nurses interact in their workplaces and professional organizations. It's a fantastic way to expand the reach of this concept.
Precisely, and it leads us to our final pillar: organize system-wide support and policies.
This one sounds like it's all about making psychological safety a core part of an organization's DNA.
You got it. It's about embedding it into the very structure of how things are done. For example, implementing anonymous reporting systems for safety concerns can empower staff to speak up without fear of retaliation.
That's a great way to ensure people feel safe voicing their concerns. The source also mentioned the importance of regular leadership reviews. Why is that so crucial?
Leadership plays a critical role in shaping the culture. Regular reviews help ensure that leaders are actively promoting psychological safety, addressing any barriers, and holding themselves accountable for creating a safe and supportive environment. They're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk.
So it's about aligning actions with words and making sure psychological safety is a priority at every level of the organization. This ECHO framework seems like a really comprehensive approach. But I know some of our listeners might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but what about the real-world challenges? What if I encounter resistance or pushback?
That's a valid concern, and it's something we'll definitely address after a quick break. We'll dive into those challenges and discuss practical strategies for overcoming them. Stay tuned.
All right, so we're back, and before the break, we were talking about some potential challenges. When it comes to expanding psychological safety, some listeners might be wondering, okay, this works well in these small teams, but how do you scale it to a whole hospital?
Yeah, that's a common concern. It's easy to imagine psychological safety thriving in a close-knit team.
Right.
But a hospital environment is so much more complex. You've got different departments, varying levels of seniority, and a whole lot of moving parts.
So how do we ensure psychological safety isn't limited to just a few pockets within the hospital?
That's where the ECHO framework really proves its value. It's not about a one-off workshop or a feel-good initiative. It's about systematically integrating psychological safety into the very fabric of the organization. It's about those consistent daily reinforcements we talked about, building a culture where speaking up is encouraged and valued at every level.
It sounds like a huge culture shift that requires everyone to be on board, from nurses on the floor to hospital administrators. But what happens when people resist that change? There are always going to be skeptics or those who are just comfortable with the way things are.
You're absolutely right. Not everyone will immediately jump on board, and the source material acknowledges that. But here's the key. You don't need 100% buy-in from day one. Focus on those who are receptive, those who are eager to embrace this new way of working.
So lead by example and let the positive results speak for themselves.
Exactly. When skeptics see tangible benefits like improved communication, fewer errors, and happier colleagues, they're more likely to come around. It's that ripple effect in action. Remember, change often starts small and then spreads outward.
That's really encouraging. But even if people are on board, time is such a precious commodity in healthcare. Nurses are already juggling so much, and some might feel like adding psychological safety initiatives is just another burden. How do we address that?
It's true. Nurses are incredibly busy, and time is a limited resource.
Yeah.
However, the source argues that investing in psychological safety actually saves time in the long run. It's counterintuitive, I know.
How so? I'm all ears.
Think about it when people feel safe to speak up about potential problems early on. You prevent small issues from escalating into major crises.
That makes sense. Addressing a concern before it becomes a code blue certainly saves everyone time and stress. And I remember the source mentioned that hospitals with strong psychological safety tend to have better retention rates, too.
Precisely. Reducing turnover saves a ton of time and resources on recruitment and training. And let's not forget the impact on patient care. When nurses feel supported and empowered, they can focus on providing the best possible care, which leads to better outcomes and fewer complications.
So it's not about piling on more work. It's about working smarter, not harder, and ultimately creating a more efficient and effective healthcare system. I love that.
Me too. And the best part is you don't have to overhaul everything at once. The source recommends starting small.
Okay.
Identify one specific area where you can strengthen psychological safety.
So that could be your own nursing unit, a committee you're part of, or even an online forum where nurses connect.
Exactly. Then choose one strategy from the ECBO framework to implement. Maybe it's incorporating an open discussion prompt at the start of each shift meeting. Or perhaps it's encouraging more peer-to-peer observation and feedback.
The key is to start somewhere and track the impact of those small changes. Observe how those actions influence team dynamics, communication patterns, and even patient outcomes.
It's about making those small, consistent efforts that over time lead to significant lasting change. It's a journey, not a destination. And I have a feeling our listeners are already thinking about where they can start applying these principles in their own work lives.
I bet they are. But before we jump into action, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the bigger picture. The source painted a really inspiring picture of what the future of healthcare could look like if psychological safety became the norm.
It's a vision worth striving for. Imagine hospitals where open communication leads to a significant reduction in medical errors.
Imagine a world where every nurse, regardless of their experience level, feels confident voicing their concerns, knowing they'll be heard and respected.
Imagine online platforms where nurses can engage in meaningful dialogue, sharing their knowledge and experiences to collectively elevate the nursing profession.
Wow, that's powerful. But how do we get from where we are now to that ideal future? What role can individual nurses play in driving this transformation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we make this vision a reality? The good news is it starts with each and every one of us. Every time a nurse speaks up in a meeting, every time a mentor guides a new colleague,
Right.
every time someone challenges a harmful norm, that's a step towards a more psychologically safe healthcare system.
I love that. It's a great reminder that we all have the power to make a difference no matter what our role is or experience level. It's about those individual actions, creating this collective wave of change. But let's be real, change can be daunting. So where do we even begin?
Well, knowledge is a great place to start. And that's where resources like the Healthcare Nurses Network come in. For our listeners who want to dive deeper into psychological safety and the ECHO framework, I highly recommend checking out healthcarenurses.net.
It's a fantastic resource, specifically designed for nurses with articles, webinars, podcasts, and even downloadable toolkits to help you implement these strategies in your own workplace.
They even have specific guidance on how to address those common challenges we talked about, like navigating hierarchies or dealing with pushback from colleagues. It's a treasure trove of practical, actionable advice.
And speaking of connecting with colleagues, don't forget about the Nurses Link Up app. It's available on both Apple and Google Play. And it's such a fantastic way to connect with other nurses, share experiences, find mentors, and build a really supportive community.
It's like having a network of support right in your pocket. You can connect with nurses who are facing similar challenges, participate in discussions about psychological safety, and get inspiration from those who are successfully implementing these initiatives.
It sounds like an incredible tool for fostering that sense of community and shared learning. That's so crucial for creating lasting change. So to really kind of recap our deep dive today, we explored this concept of expanding psychological safety beyond individual teams, the powerful ripple effect it can create, and the ECHO framework as that roadmap for making it happen.
We also tackled those real-world challenges head-on, offering practical strategies and highlighting valuable resources like healthcarenurses.net and the Nurses Link Up app to support you on your journey.
It's been such an inspiring conversation, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to go out there and be those ripples of change, creating a more psychologically safe and supportive environment for themselves and their colleagues.
Absolutely. This isn't just about improving workplaces. It's about improving lives, the lives of nurses, patients, and everyone touched by the healthcare system.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question to ponder. As you go about your day, think about this. How will you echo the change and contribute to a healthcare system where psychological safety thrives?
It's a question worth reflecting on. And remember, every small step you take, every voice you raise, every act of courage you display contributes to a brighter, safer future for all of us.
Thank you for tuning in to the Healthcare Nurses Network podcast. For more resources and support, visit healthcarenurses.net and download the Nurses Link Up app available on Apple and Google Play. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Until next time, stay safe, stay connected, and keep those ripples of change flowing.
Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Nurses Network podcast.